Welcome to Crosspointe.
Welcome to Crosspointe.
Welcome to Crosspointe.
We are an inclusive faith community
seeking to live out the loving, just, and generous way of Jesus.
We are participants in a long tradition
that's less concerned with doctrines and dogma that demand total agreement,
but a life to be lived, enjoyed, and given away to others.
What unites us is a growing awareness that life is precious.
That we are made by love in order to love.
This community is comprised of and affirms the entire human family.
Regardless of race, age, creed,
physical abilities, marital or economic status,
gender identity, or sexual orientation.
So, if you're curious and have come to see,
if you are tired and have come to rest,
if you are grateful and have come to share,
if you are wounded and have come to heal,
if you're joyful and have come to celebrate,
if you are uprooted and have come to belong,
welcome home.
Welcome home.
Welcome home.
Welcome home.
Speak the crooked creek, I heard the coyote howl. From deep in my bowels, I saw the trees slow dance in the neon wild. Ain't it crazy how I still feel like a child? I hear the sound of a new world being born, thrashing and crashing into form. I hear love in the distance calling my name, assuring me that everything is the same. I took a ride on a raindrop, and what do you know? I came across sadness, sitting alone. I said, what's the matter, sadness? Why are you so sad? And sadness replied, that's just how I am. And there was laughter after the carousel, completing the circle as far as I could tell. And you could see where you're going without doing the math. If you're stepping in, you're probably on the path. Yeah, I know God, she's a friend of mine. but your heart was tired. Feared the worst and felt the fire. Lay it all down. Lay it all down. Filled with all those anxious thoughts, and all your doubts became your God. Lay it all down. Lay it all down at the feet of Jesus. At the feet of Jesus. Lay it all down, lay it all down, lay it all down, lay it all down. Lay it all down, lay it all down, lay it all down, lay it all down. Lay it all down, lay it all down, lay it all down, lay it all down at the feet of Jesus. At the feet of Jesus. When we've given up on better days, there are memories we can't erase. Lay it all down. Lay it all down. We've come to feel what we can't explain. There's nothing here to ease the pain. Lay it all down. Lay it all down at the feet of Jesus. At the feet of Jesus. Lay it all down, lay it all down, lay it all down, lay it all down. Lay it all down, lay it all down, lay it all down, lay it all down. Lay it all down, lay it all down, lay it all down, lay it all down at the feet of Jesus. At the feet of Jesus. At the feet of Jesus. At the feet of Jesus.
Hey, good morning, Crosspointe. I wanted to remind you of a few important things today. First, as we've mentioned the past couple weeks, we are partnering with a local nonprofit called Operation Nael to provide Thanksgiving meals for several families in the local community that, through a variety of difficult circumstances, are living in a local hotel here in Apex, North Carolina. And so, if you want to help provide a Thanksgiving meal for them this season, you can go to crosspoint.org, and you'll see there on the front page where to click. There's a sign-up genius with all the information and items that are needed. And just as one last reminder, next Sunday, November 19th, will be the last day for any of the supplies or gift cards that you may purchase to be delivered to our campus. And so thanks again in advance for loving people really well this holiday season. Speaking of the holiday season, one of the most important events that we hold each year is our Remember service, where in this upcoming next 2 months, it rightly holds a lot of joy and celebration and gratitude with lots of different events and celebrations. But if we find ourselves grieving some sort of pain or loss, it can be difficult to find where that grief fits in the midst of all that. Therefore, we create space in the form of the Remember service with the hope that anyone can find compassion and support and comfort as we all try to navigate any type of grief that we may be experiencing. The Remember service will take place this year on Thursday evening, November 30th at 7 p.m., both online and in person on our campus. We do our best to personalize this event as much as possible, so if you're planning on coming, again, either online or in person, we'd encourage you to register in advance. You can go to crosspoint.org/remember, and you'll find all the details there. And as always, if you want to financially support Crosspointe and all the ways we show up with a voice and with hands and feet to try to be a force of love in the world, you can go to crosspoint.org/contribute. You'll find a variety of different ways that you can contribute financially there. We believe that we can all make a much more substantial difference by leveraging our generosity together than any of us can do individually on our own. And so thank you to all of you who continue to do that and make this community possible. And then lastly, I want to introduce our guest preacher for today. Dr. Shaniqua Walker-Barnes is a highly esteemed scholar, theologian, and clinical psychologist whose work mainly focuses upon the healing and the legacies of racial and gender oppression. She's a professor of practical theology and pastoral care at Columbia Theological Seminary. And Dr. Shaniqua is the author of 3 books, Sacred Self-Care, I Bring the Voices of My People, and Too Heavy a Yoke. And for the past few years, she has been one of the people that we've most wanted to have come and share with our community. And so we're so very honored to have her with us today. And we're so very grateful to welcome Dr. Walker Barnes today and learn from her wisdom, heart, and expertise. Enjoy.
Good morning. I'm Shaniqua Walker Barnes. It is a joy to be here with you today. I'm going to be preaching this morning from Matthew 26, verses 20 through 25, and then 31 through 35. I'm going to read it from the CEB version. That evening, he took his place at the table with the 12 disciples. As they were eating, he said, I assure you that one of you will betray me. Deeply saddened, each one said to him, I'm not the one, am I, Lord? He replied, the one who will betray me is the one who dips his hand with me into this bowl. The human one goes to his death, just as it is written about him. But how terrible it is for that person who betrays the human one. It would have been better for him if he had never been born. Now Judas, who would betray him, replied, It's not me, is it, Rabbi? Jesus answered, You said it. Then Jesus said to his disciples, Tonight you will all fall away because of me. This is because it is written, I will hit the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will go off in all directions. But after I'm raised up, I'll go before you to Galilee. Peter replied, If everyone else stumbles because of you, I'll never stumble. Jesus said to him, I assure you that before the rooster crows tonight, you will deny me 3 times. Peter said, Even if I must die alongside you, I won't deny you. All the disciples said the same thing. Over the past few years, I've been thinking a lot about the challenges of being an advocate for racial and gender justice, both in the church and in society as a whole. The first time I felt the sting of betrayal in racial justice work was in high school. From the moment I transferred into my high school as a 10th grader, the patterns of racial inequity were obvious to me. How the school's 20% white student body populated all of the AP classes. They ran the student government, and they were routinely let off the hook for behaviors such as cheating. Pretty soon, conversations with older students, both black and white, confirmed that what I was seeing was real and had been so for decades. But everyone claimed not to know the source. Now, I must have already been a family systems theorist in the making, because somehow I knew that it was possible to change a system without necessarily knowing how it got to be that way. So at the end of my junior year, my best friend, who was also a transfer student, we started organizing. And in the fall of our senior year, we gathered our peers with us to envision and strategize and organize with us. Pretty soon, changes started happening, and so did the blowback. Finally, one day as I was walking down the hall, one of the teachers, an African-American woman, pulled me aside and said, Shaniqua, what you're doing is important and it's making a difference, but it's dangerous. You've made some people mad and they're out to get you. And I can promise you that your classmates won't be there for you when that happens, because I have heard how they talk about you. You can't jeopardize your own future on behalf of people who don't appreciate it. I was devastated. I didn't know what to do with the betrayal. I'd expected pushback from some people in the school, but not from the people who were organizing alongside me. I couldn't believe that the people I believed to be my allies were turning out to be adversaries. Now, that's just the High School Musical version of an activist struggle. The adult version is where it gets real. As multiple senior activists have told me, most movements don't get destroyed from the outside. They implode from within. Justice advocates are so used to fighting that often when we get together, we can't turn the fight off. We aim it towards each other. It's a scene that I have watched play out again and again among women of color and in interracial groups, among clergy, activists, community developers, seminary students, whether it's in live discussions or it's in organizations or in social media, and yes, very often in the classroom, in the church. Again and again, I have witnessed the turmoil that arises when conflict and harm happen among people who are supposedly allies on the same side of justice. For example, when white Christians gaslight people of color in anti-racist dialogue, when black male civil rights activists sexually harass and even assault the black women who work alongside them, when white gay men dismiss the embodiment of gay men of color as insufficiently queer, when supposedly radical feminists exclude and demean trans women, when a friend or a colleague in ministry is accused of lying about being indigenous, and when white people who supposedly read all the books about racism in 2020 accuse African American and indigenous people of being anti-Semitic, when we insist that both Israelis and Palestinians deserve to live free of terror and genocide. Maybe we're the ones sometimes who betray our allies. Perhaps we are the ones who attack them in public or private because their understanding of justice differs from ours. Maybe we're silent when they speak up and we abandon them to do the heavy lifting themselves. Maybe we don't speak up for them when they are attacked by others for their activism. Or maybe we swoop in to take credit for and advantage of the hard work that they have been doing because we think it's our due after years of being unacknowledged. Maybe we center ourselves in their stories, using tears and fragility to make ourselves the victim. Or perhaps we fall prey to the scarcity mentality, believing that we have to upstage or even belittle their work to advance our own. We are betrayed in our justice work, and sometimes we are the betrayers. Fortunately, as the hymn tells us, Jesus knows about all our struggles. Jesus was well acquainted with betrayal by the people who were supposed to be on his side. Matthew 26 is all about betrayal and conspiracy against Jesus from both within and outside his movement. There is Judas turning Jesus over to the religious elite, Peter, James, and John falling asleep as Jesus prayed alone, the disciple who undermined Jesus' teachings of peace and love when he cut off the ear of the high priest's servants, the disciples abandoning Jesus after his arrest, Peter denying him 3 times, and then finally the testimony of false witnesses at a sham of a midnight trial. On numerous occasions throughout this chapter, Jesus' brothers become his betrayers. His allies become his adversaries. But why? Like a preschooler, that's the question I want to ask today over and over again. Why did the disciples betray Jesus? Why did they do it not once, but multiple times? Why did they betray him even after swearing that they would remain loyal to him to the point of death, just after making that promise? I've been reading and rereading Matthew 26 with this question in mind. And I find that this text offers us 3 reasons why our allies might, even if temporarily, become our adversaries. The first reason is fear. In one moment, the disciples are mansplaining Jesus. They're telling the Lord of all that surely he is wrong when he says that they will betray him. Now, at this point, they've been with him for 3 years. They've seen him perform amazing acts of healing, not to mention like walking on water, calming a storm, and making a fig tree wither and die. With the exception of that talk about raising a temple up in 3 days, everything Jesus has said will come to pass, has come to pass. But still, they can't fathom the possibility that they will abandon him. To hear them tell it they are ride or die. They have, after all, already left behind their families, their farms, their livelihood to follow this man from Nazareth, a place that nothing good ever came out of. They followed him when it meant risking having no place to lay their head and no food to eat. They have followed him into places where they weren't welcome, places like Samaria. But fear sometimes pops up. The funny thing about fear is that we never know exactly how we'll respond when it arises, no matter how many times we have faced it. When the disciples pledged their loyalty to Jesus, they are sitting in the comfort of a house after a satisfying Passover meal. Their bodies are likely in rest and digest mode, the state when free from danger or threat, the parasympathetic nervous system is activated and handles some important housekeeping functions for the body. The heart rate, the blood pressure, respiration, they're all normalized. The body metabolizes food. Systems of elimination and reproduction kick in and do their work. The disciples are feeling good. They're feeling safe and strong, so they make a promise. But then conditions change. An armed crowd shows up, having been sent by the chief priests and elders, and worse yet, led by one of their own. They're no longer in rest and digest. Faced with a threat, the parasympathetic nervous system recedes to the background, and the sympathetic nervous system comes online, kicking them into fight or flight. Some of them move into fight mode. They meet violence with violence, and then all of them flee. There was no time to process what was happening, to recall the promise they had just made. The disciples did exactly what God has designed our bodies to do. They responded to the threat at hand by fighting it and running from it. Perhaps they thought Jesus would do the same. After all, he had fled a hostile crowd before. Only Peter pushes through his fear to follow Jesus from a distance, to wait in a courtyard, maybe in the hope that things would turn out well. But when Peter gets confronted about his relationship to Jesus, his fear kicks in too, and Jesus' prediction turns out to be true. So that's fear. The second reason is fatigue. Just after the Passover meal, Jesus and the disciples go to the Gethsemane. He tells most of them to wait for him, but he asks Peter, James, and John to accompany him as he goes off to pray. Scripture tells us that Jesus is sad and anxious. He knows the suffering that is to come. In this moment, Jesus reveals something critical about the human condition. In our suffering, we need God and we need one another. So he's not just asking these three to just come hang out with him. He's asking them to embody pastoral presence for him. They've been interning with Jesus for 3 years now. It's time for them to step into the leadership roles that they've been craving. They fail miserably, not once, but 3 times. And they do it for a simple reason. They're tired. As Jesus himself says, their spirits are eager, but their flesh is weak. Now, this is a statement that we often interpret as a condemnation of the flesh, or as some people say, a condemnation of the natural self. But if you've ever worked for a pastor or a leader who burns the candle at both ends and expects their team to do the same, maybe you see the same thing that I see here. Namely, Jesus is doing too much. It's the first day of Passover, after all. This is a night that's supposed to be about retelling the story of the Israelites' exodus from Egypt, singing songs, eating the Passover meal, drinking 4 glasses of wine, and relaxing. But Jesus, he spends the meal making accusations, and then instead of letting the disciples lounge at the table, he insists on going to Gethsemane. Now, any other time, Peter, James, and John would have been thrilled to be at his right and left hand, but on this night, they're worn out. See, they're not working with the knowledge that Jesus has, namely that his arrest is imminent and he will be executed within the week. They're not working with the adrenaline that comes from knowing that you have limited time left. Their exhaustion gets the better of them and they can't be present for Jesus the way he needs them to be at the hour he was most in need. Fatigue. The final reason is disappointed expectations. The disciples have been following Jesus for 3 years, listening to his teaching, watching him in action. By this time, they expect that they know how he thinks and what he will do. So at the beginning of Matthew 26, when a woman shows up with an alabaster vase full of expensive perfume, they fully expect that Jesus will instruct her to sell it and give the money to the poor, or at least that he'll tell the disciples to do that. But Jesus defies their expectations in the most unimagined way possible. He allows the woman to anoint him with it. And the disciples, all of them, not just Judas, they're furious about it. I wonder if this is what drove Judas's betrayal. It's immediately after the encounter with this woman that Judas sought out the chief priests and made the bargain to turn Jesus over to them for 30 pieces of silver. Now, we know very little about Judas Iscariot, except that he was the treasurer for this band of disciples. We don't know his call story, how he came to follow Jesus. Little is even known about his family name. We don't know the reasons for his betrayal. All that we know is that at some point, he decided that his needs and desires were not in alignment with those of Jesus and the movement that Jesus led. Now, that's a common occurrence in justice work. You see, the thing about justice movements is that they are comprised of people who are united only in respect to their concern for a particular issue. They're diverse in every other respect: backgrounds, personalities, communication styles, even our understandings of and approaches to justice. Some of us want retribution. Some of us want restorative justice. Some of us just want everybody to get along and stop fighting. Sometimes we know where we want to go, but we disagree on how to get there. Often, though, we don't even agree on the destination. We just agree that what is happening now is untenable and that something needs to change. Even when we do agree on the work that needs to be done and the road we should take to get there, it is not easy. Activism takes place on fault lines, the places in our societies where there is discontinuity in our social systems and our relationships. These fault lines are created by oppressive forces that have ordered the world around greed and domination rather than around love and justice. Now, in geology, when energy is released on active faults, it can result in earthquakes. In activism, we try to generate and release energy on oppression's active fault lines in order to advance the causes of racial and ethnic justice, gender and sexual equity, economic justice, climate care, disability and health reform, religious freedom, immigration rights, and so on. Now, if we're fortunate, we can set in motion earthquakes that destabilize and transform oppressive systems. But sometimes they destabilize us to the point where we betray each other and maybe even betray the causes that we are working for. The question then is, how can we avoid this? Or actually, perhaps that isn't the question at all. Maybe it is a given that we will abandon and harm and betray each other in our activism, just as Jesus' close friends and disciples did to him again and again. Maybe what this text reveals to us is that disappointing each other is inevitable in our activism and advocacy. The real question is how we will handle it when we disappoint each other, when we disappoint ourselves. Will we run away for good? Will we be taken over in our shame and guilt in the way that Judas was? Will we cancel each other and write each other off as part of those people rather than part of our people? Or will we learn, as the rest of the disciples did, to find our way back to one another through the fear, through the fatigue, through the disappointed expectations? Will we be able to keep our movements going and to bear witness to the flame of hope that continues to burn amidst oppression? The disciples betrayed Jesus, and yet, after his resurrection, he still went ahead of them to Galilee to wait for them there, to restore their hope in him and perhaps their hope in one another. Jesus waits for us still. Will we meet him there together? Receive this benediction from the International Ecumenical Peace Convocation. Let us go with Jesus, the light who guides us on our way. May our hope be that the sun of justice will rise one morning on all humankind. May the God of peace, our constant companion, lead us along paths of solidarity and hope, and give us the joy of being united in God's love. Amen.
If you would like to know more or get connected to Crosspointe, go to crosspoint.org. If you're in need of care or assistance, go to crosspoint.org/care. And welcome home.